Okay, well, welcome everybody to Solar Noon Tuesday on this fine September 3rd. I'm Jay Warmke with solarpvtraining.com. And what we're going to do here today, our normal process is we'll go through the headlines of what's been happening in the last week or so in the solar industry. Then I'll highlight some events that are coming up, conferences, webinars, things like that. And then we'll go into a deep dive, not terribly deep, but deep as much as we can do in 20 minutes. And this particular session, we're going to talk about how the various states are doing as far as solar policy. There's a recent report that just came out that gives a grade card for every single state. So we'll just do a quick review of that so you won't have to find your way through that particular document. So let's go ahead and get into the news for the week of, let's see, this was the week of September 3rd. And in testimony before the Ohio Power Siting Board, by the supposed leader of a grassroots opposition group that was opposing a 120 megawatt system that's being installed at or near Mount Vernon, Ohio. And so they admitted during this testimony that actually the funding for this grassroots effort was coming from the oil and gas industry. And in fact, lobbyists and consultants that were being paid by the natural gas industry were organizing these town halls where local folks would come in. And according to those people in attendance, and of course the developers, who are going to be slightly biased, I would imagine, saying that a lot of misinformation is being spread at these events. For example, one example that was cited is they showed pictures of heavily damaged solar development, saying this is the kind of thing that can happen here in Central Ohio. Unfortunately, the pictures they were showing were from a solar array that was hit, a direct hit by a hurricane on the island of St. Croix in the Caribbean. So very unlikely that a direct hit of a hurricane is going to take place here in Central Ohio. But then many of this misinformation was then redirected or testimony given by local people at the Ohio Power Siting Board. In fact, a expert witness from the developers, it was Heidi Gurovitz, a professor at Cleveland State University, the College of Law. She pointed out that more than half of all of the opposition arguments were actually directly traced to misinformation that was being distributed by the oil and gas industry at this meeting. Clean energy jobs grew at a rate double that of the overall U.S. job growth in 2023, according to a recent report by the U.S. Department of Energy. The clean energy sector grew at an annualized rate of about 4.2%, as compared with an overall growth rate in jobs of around 2%. The solar industry grew even faster, growing at about a 5.3%. In fact, the sector ended up adding about 142,000 new jobs in 2023. And for the first time, the unionization rate of those workers within the clean energy sector actually was higher than the overall industrial unionization rate on jobs. In fact, in clean energy, it was 12.4% compared to 11.2% overall. And in large measure, this is tied to the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that ties a lot of the incentives for development to paying prevailing wage. The electric demand in the first half of 2024 has increased 5% over the electrical demand that happened in the same period last year. Well, all of the different generating sources from various fuels increased this year over last year. Renewable energy saw the greatest increases. Generations from utility solar jumped over 30%, while small-scale solar, that's the residential and commercial rooftop type solar, grew a little, nearly 17.5%. Wind energy generation increased about 8%. Electricity from natural gas grew at 5.3%, and then it was followed by nuclear at 2.6% and coal at 1.2%. Now, so far in 2024, there have been 375 new utility scale generating plants that have come online. Nearly 90% of these systems are powered by renewable energy. Of these, 243 were solar farms, utility scale solar. 75 were from storage battery systems connected to the grid, and 18 were from wind farms. There were 17 onshore and one offshore wind farm. Enphase recently announced that it will begin soon shipping batteries and microinverters that are manufactured in America and that qualify for the domestic content tax bonus tax credit bonus of 10% that's outlined in the IRA. The company is now taking pre-orders for the IQ Battery 5P, as well as for the IQ 8 microinverter, certain selected models. The product is expected to ship within a couple of weeks, so this is coming up fairly soon. The domestic content tax credit bonus of 10% only applies to commercial and industrial installations. It does not apply to residential systems. So bear that in mind if you're thinking about that. Groundbreaking recently took place on a lithium battery recycling facility near Chester, South Carolina. This $11 million plant is the first in the nation that's designed to directly recycle lithium-ion batteries, the type of batteries that are used in electric vehicles, in your mobile telephones, and also in solar installations increasingly. Until now, the recycling of lithium-ion batteries was considered much too expensive, just not economical. It, in fact, cost more than mining and processing and making a new battery. However, the developers of this facility, Princeton New Energy, claim that their process, it's a low-pressure plasma process, actually costs 40% less than traditional recycling methods. The plans are that this facility will be up and running and in full capacity by mid-2028. And that is the news from the solar industry for this week. So anybody have anything you want to add into that mix at the moment? Well, before we jump on to the local events, anything cross your desk? All right, so we'll jump into the announcements for the week. There will be a webinar September 4th, 1 p.m. on solar planning and zoning. This is being put on by SolSmart. On September 10th at noon, these guys are beginning to compete with my Solar Noon Tuesday stuff here. Well, they've got one on fire risks and solar and batteries. Then there's another, the RE Plus conference is coming up in Anaheim, California. That will take place the week of September 9th through the 12th. That's a big event. So if you can get out there. September 17th at noon, there's another SolSmart event that's talking about permitting and inspection practices. That's also at noon. September 19th at 2 p.m. There's third-party ownership process event. I always love, and this is a little pet peeve of mine, where so many of the people in this industry, any industry, they throw around the acronyms like TPO, like everybody knows what that is. And if you look at the description, nowhere do they explain it, but that's in fact third-party ownership. So worth the price of admission just for that. Okay, September 25th at 2 p.m., digital tools that are going to be required for the energy transition. So that's coming up. And those were all webinars, of course. Another webinar, September 25th at 2, community, commercial, and industrial solar storage. Again, that's another acronym that no one wants to explain, but CCI, community solar, commercial, and industrial solar. So basically large solar, but not utility scale solar. And then, of course, there's the online training programs that we offer at solarpvtraining.com, our shameless plug there. And I'm also plugging the new textbook, the 9th edition of Understanding Photovoltaics. In fact, off at the publisher as we speak. So those will begin shipping here soon. And that is what's happening in webinars and conferences. So once again, anybody have anything they want to add to the mix since we've got this interactive opportunity going on here? I always like to take advantage of that rather than just ramble on.
Hey, Jay, Bruce Schubert here. You went to some event in DC, I think, a few weeks ago. How did that go for you?
No, I didn't actually go to I went to the event. Yeah, the ACES conference, which was in DC. Yeah, that was, oh gosh, feels like a lifetime ago. Yeah, I was, ACES, good organization. I think they're trying to struggle to find what they're all about. I would say my general impression on it was, I should be careful here since they're sort of sponsoring this. So now it felt like aging academics talking about what they did back in the 1990s that has led to what we're experiencing today and how they need to be patted on the back periodically for all the good work they did 30 years ago. That's kind of where I came away from it. Um, it didn't have, in fact, I was just feeling like, how do you make this boring? This stuff is so exciting. And I just felt like it was panel discussions that I found mostly dull. So hate to say it, on the other hand, there's an Ohio Energy Conference coming up here in about a month. And I guess I should put it in my list of events. It's in Columbus, Ohio, second week of October, I think. That to me is a very exciting conference. And while they do get a little bit into fossil fuels, it really feels like there's energy, like this is where the industry is happening. So who knows? That's just my own personal prejudice, I'm sure. So anything else? Okay, so what I thought we would do is we talk about this worst to first, the rankings. So this is normally you get these kind of ranking things at the end of the year. This is our mid-year, top 50 songs of 2024 kind of thing. This is how the various states rank when it comes to policies that support solar installations. So I was going through this and there were some real surprises for me. Certain states that you think would be ranked quite high end up being ranked pretty low, and other states that you think would be pretty low, are doing pretty well. So I thought I'd do them in reverse order. This is from the report that's published by CNET. And CNET is, I think it just stands for like computer networking or whatever. Anyway, it's a technology organization that does this kind of thing. So, what are the policies that we're looking at? Well, basically, again, because this is state by state, it really doesn't have anything to do with federal policies. So if you're talking about the IRA or, tax incentives or anything like that, that are at the federal level, completely ignored. These are at the state level, and certain states do offer state tax credits. So just like the ITC that you get at the federal level, there are tax credits that apply to state income taxes. There are a number of states that still offer SRECs programs, renewable energy certificates. And so that is another benefit that states can offer. Property tax exemptions. So if you're going to be installing solar on your home or business, are you going to get dinged for it in your taxes? Are they going to add on the value of this system and you have to pay tax on it? So many states exempt it from increases in property tax. Sales tax exemptions, do you have to pay sales tax on the equipment that you're installing? And community solar access, community solar, as we've talked about in previous sessions, is basically if your home's not suitable for solar, can a developer develop a larger solar array? You buy a portion of it and then apply that solar production to your home. Um, all of that works just fine if you get the cooperation of the local utility, because they have to take what's being produced over there and apply it to your bill. Most utilities are not being very accommodating when it comes to expanding solar in their region. So states pretty much have to come up with the rules and say, you will do this. And if you want to operate within our state. So that's what they're talking about, community solar access. And of course, net metering policies. And net metering policies is kind of the big dog as you're looking through these things. That seems to be the tail that's wagging the dog on how they're evaluating the various state by state process. So let's start with number 52. And and as I go through this, if we happen to hit your state and you want to throw in some additional information, that'd be great, because we're going to pop through them pretty quick, because obviously if I spend a minute on each one, it's an hour going through every state. So Nebraska gets to finish last with an F. And just to give you a little bit of a heads up, half of the states end up getting an F. It felt to me as I'm looking through this like the class that nobody in the class did very well. So everybody's, you're getting a good grade if you get a D. So all right, so Nebraska, all they have is basically wholesale net metering. That's the only benefit there. A lot of these are going to be in the same kind of situation. I'm not quite sure how they differentiate between Oklahoma and Nebraska. Hard to differentiate if you're driving through, but it's they're basically um I put in here perhaps at retail rate, but then as I was looking further, it's not. It's at a less than retail rate. Mississippi, again, it's a wholesale rate. They like to call that avoided cost. That just sounds better, I guess, but it's basically the utility will only pay you what it would have cost them to buy that on the wholesale market. So the avoided cost, as opposed to a 1-for-1 retail, your meter runs backwards, your meter runs forward. A lot of the states, a lot of the utilities are getting away from it. There seems to be a differentiation between state governed and utility governed. So I don't know from an end user that it matters much. It's the Public Utilities Commissions that are setting this, and they're owned by the utilities anyway. I mean, not literally, but literally. Okay, so Mississippi gets an F. Again, Wyoming, very much the same situation with an F. All of these are just avoided cost or wholesale. Utah. So we've got a bunch of these states here that their only incentive is that you can get wholesale net metering. We have Georgia. Georgia's a little bit better in that they do have some local and utility administered low income programs to incentivize low income people to put solar on their home. But other than that, they're like the rest of them, at least according to this report. Kentucky also gets an F. So Don, if you're on the call, your home state. Now they do a little bit better in that it's not truly wholesale, but it's not retail either. It's a state dictated rate of reimbursement that you're getting there, but it's not 1-for-1. North Dakota gets an F. State, it's wholesale. The solar panel systems, though, are exempt from property tax for a period of 5 years. And then we get into Missouri. Missouri gets state governed net building. So again, it's wholesale. I don't know why they rank better than, say, North Carolina or North Dakota that has something else in the mix.
I'm in Missouri, Jay.
Yeah. Okay. What's happening
Yeah,
in Missouri?
it's terrible. I also don't know why they rank any higher than any of those other states. There's nothing at the state level. I'm a pretty big proponent of community solar, and there was actually 2 bills introduced last year, the same bill, but one in the House, one in the Senate, to try to get community solar passed. And it was actually Republican sponsored in both houses. I actually went to the one hearing where it like for the first time in 3 years was able to be debated on the floor, and the utility company sent in their people and just completely destroyed it, and it never went anywhere. But yeah, it was pretty sad, but that's the state of things here.
Yeah, that's a shame. I know Ohio, they decided with the community solar to because apparently we don't know any other states or can read anything that's happening in any other states. Our legislator decided they needed to experiment to see if community solar would work. So they are having a couple of pilot projects. So,
Okay.
so after Ohio's figured it out, we'll let the rest of the states in on, the secret.
Yeah, we'd love to learn.
Yeah, right. We've got to be the teacher. Yeah, Pete, you've got a question or a comment?
Yeah, am I to understand that the states that have gotten an F so far provide these minimal benefits, but they also apply property tax to the value of the solar?
Oh yeah. 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 So far, all of these states, I think they're, except for this one, South Dakota gives you a certain exemption.
5 year, I think you said.
Oh, but there was, yeah, the one before, yeah, there was 5. Now South Dakota is giving you 70% of the tax up to 50,000. So you get some pretty convoluted things in here. But for the most part, if you put a $50,000 solar array on your home, then your property valuation will, in theory, go up $50,000, and you will be taxed on that additional value to your property. Some states are saying, no, let's just say, don't do that. Now, I'm not quite sure how they would enforce that, because, how do you value property anyway? It's kind of a guy walking around going, I think that's worth 200,000, it's so, I don't know. So were you assuming that it was automatically tax-free anyway?
No, I was just wondering at what point we start going from an F to a D as far as not not taxing the property value of the solar arrays.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to miss when that cutoff, when that transition occurs on your
Okay.
list.
Well, we've got a ways.
Okay.
I'll give you a hint. About half of the states get an F. So, yeah, it seems to me that it has to do with primarily net metering. If you get to the 1-for-1, retail net metering, then you're going to get pushed up in the rankings. So jump back in here and just say, now this is an example. West Virginia has a retail rate for net metering. So they'll do a 1-for-1, meter rolls forward, meter rolls backwards. At least under this report, it seemed to me there was just a change. I was down in West Virginia. But there was a bit of a change in there. It might not be 1-for-1 exactly, but it's still pretty good. But they have like nothing else. So I guess that's how they ranked it there.
Yeah, just real quick, West Virginia has basically 2 major utilities, and one of them had a rate case with the PSC that Solar United Neighbors and Sierra Club fought, and they wanted to cut it in half for the net metering rate, but they came back and negotiated about 25%, and that changes at the end of this year. So anybody who gets grandfathered in by the end of this year has 1-to-1 for 25 years. But if you miss it, then you're going to get a lowered rate in Mon Power Allegheny, or Mon Power First Energy territory.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that was the First Energy, the evil empire. So that we should have like sound effects every time we say the name First Energy. We play that dun 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 dun, from Star Wars or whatever. So I always like to tell students that utilities don't get up every morning trying to figure out how to destroy the world. They're mostly people who are just trying to make a living, except for First Energy. Now, I think they get up every day trying to figure out how to destroy the world. So they're the Darth Vader of utility companies. All right, so then we get into Tennessee, still an F, utility governed net billing. So it's wholesale rate, and the property tax exemption, they do want to charge you 12.5% of the value of your solar. Now, how they came up with that, we'll never know. But so anything, the first 12.5% is taxable, the rest of it non-taxable. That seems like a weird one. Arkansas, they do have retail, just like West Virginia. So West Virginia and Arkansas battling it out for see who's better, who gets a better F. Right. Then we get into Kansas. They're getting an F. State governed, of course, they're not quite wholesale, not quite retail, somewhere between. And they are exempt from property taxes for 10 years, as opposed to 5, like we had on some other place, one of the other states. Pennsylvania, they're also rated as an F, but they're getting retail rate net metering. Is anybody on from Pennsylvania know if that's changed at all, or if you get the meter rolls forward, meter rolls backwards kind of situation there?
Yeah, it varies depending on who your supplier is. The rural co-ops will give you a percentage. It's like 3 cents per kilowatt, and they're charging you 13. The non-rural co-ops seem to have a better deal.
Yeah. Well, and typically the retail or the co-ops and municipals, they're considered nonprofits. They're typically not governed by the state rules, so they can do kind of whatever they want to do. So it sounds like in Pennsylvania, at least your co-op is doing that avoided cost kind of thing. Here in Ohio, our co-op actually does full retail. They'll do you 1-for-1, but they charge like a $47 a month access fee if you have solar. It's only like $24 if you don't have solar. So they're really dinging it to you if you've got solar with a fixed fee. But they do give you a good payback. And actually what I found is if you overproduce, they'll give you wholesale rate for anything over what you're consuming, and that can go to offset that access fee. So with our solar array, we sometimes, many times, get down to zero. So
yeah, what they're changing it too here. It's like I have a 4-year window, but they're no longer going to have an annual true up. It's going to be a monthly true up.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you can't aggregate meters anymore. Wherever that solar array is hooked up, that's the only meter you're getting credit on, which kind of defeats the purpose of what I did. So
yeah. Yeah. And our access is a $47 a month. So it's pretty steep. That's whether you use 1 kilowatt hour or a million kilowatt hours, you're still going to pay that $47 a month, which to me is pretty crazy. But, if that's really what it costs them, fine. These are rural organizations and there's usually fair distance between the different properties. I would just like them to actually show that that is in fact what it costs. They don't seem interested in doing that, but we'll see. All right. Well, thanks, Eric, for that. Alabama, not surprisingly to me, gets an F, but they are fully exempt from property taxes down there, still only paying wholesale on net metering. Iowa gets an F, their wholesale rate, property tax exemption for 5 years. And they're the first one that pops up that's fully exempt from sales tax. So that can be a big deal. Obviously, if you're paying, $30,000 and you've got a tax rate of say 7%, you're up $2,100 or so. So that's, significant money. Texas, I was kind of surprised. I thought Texas would place higher because they are, but I guess most all of their development is at the utility scale. But they're doing wholesale and they are exempt from property taxes. So they were rated there at 35th. Alaska, well, that doesn't surprise me. But they have local property tax exemption, not statewide. So it's based on your locality and also a wholesale rate. Louisiana gets an F. They're wholesale as well and fully exempt from property taxes. And then Indiana, well, Indiana has been back and forth here recently. I know that they're in flux, but they have wholesale rate. I think that's a relatively new situation. If my memory is serving, that was something in the last year or two. There was a bit of a controversy that happened there where they went from retail to wholesale. Fully exempt from property taxes and fully exempt from sales tax. Anybody from Indiana who has a comment on what's happening in the Hoosier state? No. Okay, Nevada. Now Nevada gets an F as well. Now theirs is not quite wholesale, not quite retail, somewhere between. A lot of these, when they say state governed, it's basically a situation like it sounds like in West Virginia, where the Public Utility Commission stepped in some negotiations. The utility probably said we want it to be wholesale or avoided cost, as they like to say. Public probably said, no, we don't like that. We like retail. And then in a King Solomon decision, they decided to cut the baby in half and give it all, give both halves to the utility. Not quite a good analogy there. All right. Idaho also gets an F at number 30. And they have wholesale net metering, and then they talk about the initial 40% is deductible for state sales tax, with 20%. So basically it's like an accelerated depreciation for the system. Although they do say that there's a maximum per year of $5,000. So this is obviously aimed at very small scale installations. So, but this is for your state sales tax, or not sales tax, sorry, income tax. So you could depreciate it, accelerated depreciation of sorts for state's income tax. Montana also gets an F. They have a retail net metering, and then $20,000 is exempt from property taxes for the first 10 years. I'm just wondering how many people in Montana bother to tell people that they've installed solar. So great distances there. Michigan also gets an F. They have a retail net metering, which sounds pretty good actually. And they're fully exempt from property taxes. So these things are graded on a curve, obviously. So North Carolina, also another hotspot for solar. I was kind of surprised because if you look at the states that really are growing in solar, of course, California has been a leader, but Texas has taken over #1. We see Colorado accelerating, but North Carolina, even Ohio are quite a ways up there in the list. So there's state governed wholesale, and 80% of the value of the system is property tax exempt. Here comes Ohio. We always love to be in the middle of everything, the heart of it all, right? We get nervous if we're ranked in anything above like 20th. So that's sort of the sweet spot we like to be. You know, we strive for mediocrity. That's our goal. Okay, so we have state. It's not quite retail, not quite wholesale. So that's where it is as far as the state net metering. And this surprised me because back at least a few years ago, it was not exempt from sales tax. Property tax, fully exempt. Again, this is where I live, so I'm just questioning how much that benefit, because I know our guys who do the tax assessment, they only do it like every 4 or 5 years. So you know, it's practically tax exempt regardless. They just don't look at it. And then this is where we jump from F's in Ohio to D in Florida. So we've moved up in the world, and they have retail net metering. 80% of the value of the system is property tax exempt, and they're exempt from sales tax as well. So I know Siggy, if you're still there, you were on here from down in Tampa. Anything else to add about policies in Florida?
I thought the property tax is 100%. I believe so, but could be wrong. That could be that something changed and I didn't catch it. But my solar stuff is 100% property tax exemption from it. And also there is a change or a battle going on in Orange County, Florida. I think that's might be Duke Energy, where they are introducing in 2025 a new retail or a new retail rate for the solar customers, and want to encourage them to install storage. So something is going on there. I have not followed up closely because I'm in Hillsborough County, so it doesn't affect me here. But basically, they're de-incentivizing backfeeding into the grid in Orange County.
Okay. So they're claiming they're trying to encourage solar by making it not profitable to sell it back to the utility.
Yeah. I just read up on it. There was just this month in June there was a public hearing or public workshop. So I don't know the outcome of it, but they want to replace a net metering with true net solar. That's how they call it. True net solar.
That for some reason that sounds like in the corporate line of, in order to better serve you, we're going to raise your prices.
Yeah.
So that's
And every legislative cycle, we are always under attack by the utilities trying to slip in some new regulations or solar laws that into the constitution or under the ballot. About every 4 years, we have the same battle.
Mhm.
Been lucky so far.
Yep. So far. So, well, you are the Sunshine State.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, I think the utilities are really doing their best to try and put themselves out of business. So we should let them, I guess. There a lot of these just sort of show that in many ways we're moving backwards. You know, it's a long way from the day of, you know, the meter runs forward, the meter runs backwards. Most utilities are moving towards a avoided cost model, where they'll pay you wholesale and charge you retail. And then when you get into some of the time of day pricing structures and all these other things, it really just moves you more and more towards installing batteries to avoid, so you're doing self-consumption, because it's not worth it to sell it back to the utility. And then when the utility steps in and says, okay, now we're going to increase the access fees and we're going to do some other punitive actions, it leads you to say, all right, well, I've already got batteries, I've already got solar, you know, maybe I just don't need you. At that point, you can just disconnect. And I think that's kind of the evolution we're moving towards, until the utilities get smart and decide that their real value to this is connectivity. And if they can begin to talk up why having electrical connected systems and services is the value of their existence, because we can supply energy for ourselves. We don't need the utility. If you make it uneconomical to tie in, well, then we just won't at some point. And so they have to provide us services, connected electrical services. Don't know what that is, but it will be a thing. This was the first one that really surprised me, I think, was Hawaii. Really being ranked number 24th. You would think that they would be up in the top 10 for sure, in that they are so focused on solar. State tax credit, 35% of the systems cost up to $5,000. Not really great. Must be at least 5 kW. Now that's kind of weird in Hawaii because a lot of the systems there are smaller. So anyway, that, you know, that's a moderate size residential. Wholesale rate for net metering. Again, that surprises me a little bit. Local tax exemptions and statewide community solar programs. So they get a D. I would have thought they'd be higher. The state of Washington also gets a D. They have retail net metering, solar panel systems fully exempt from sales tax, and they have statewide community solar programs. And it's important when I don't want to brush over the statewide community solar because that's a big deal. I think I saw somewhere well over 50% of the homes out there really are not suitable for solar. For a lot of different reasons. Some are physical. Some is you're located in an area that just is covered with trees. There's no ground spot and the roof is unsuitable. Like here in Marietta, where our office is, a lot of old Victorian homes with the steeply pitched roofs with a lot of dormers and slate. Not really good for solar, but community solar would work quite nicely. But then a lot of the other reasons why people would be towards community solar and not putting it on their own home is many people simply do not qualify or have the money. They don't qualify for financing. So installing a solar array is outside their economic reach, but buying into a system basically the same as paying your electric bill each month would qualify for them. And many people are renters, you know, so why would you install system on your home if you're renting? And if you're the landlord and the occupant is paying the cost of electricity, why would you install solar there? So all of those things kind of combine to make more than half the homes unsuitable for solar. So if we're going to get into some really deep penetration of solar at the residential level, we're going to have to use community solar. That's got to be in every state at some point. All right, Vermont, also a D. That's another state that's been very green. And who knows, maybe I know Green Mountain Energy is up there in Vermont. very, very solar friendly. So maybe it's because the utility is so solar friendly, they don't necessarily need a lot of legislation. I don't know. But they have state governed, it's again, not retail, not wholesale. For net metering, it's fully exempt for property tax, sales tax, and they do have a community solar. Maine, also a D. Retail net metering, that's good and exempt from sales tax. Wisconsin, sounds like battleground states here. State governed net metering, and then fully exempt from property tax, sales tax, community solar. So we're starting to hit more and more of them here. Delaware, retail net metering and low income programs, no community solar there. Puerto Rico, they are really moving now after the hurricanes to fully solar at the utility scale. So they've got net metering at retail down there. They're exempt from property taxes, sales taxes, and they have low income programs throughout the territory. New Hampshire, also a D. Again, I would have thought some of these New England states would have ranked higher. Then we get into California. Now, this was a big change in this ranking because when net metering 3.0 kicked in, they essentially went from retail to wholesale. So they jumped down from an A to a D in the rankings this year. So it feels like, I guess California is a good example of the schizophrenic way that these systems are legislated, because the state and the politicians are quite friendly and want to enact activities that are supportive of renewable energy. But the Public Utilities Commission seems to be in the pocket of the utilities and is actually seeking to roll back many of these programs that the politicians are trying to put in place. So that's been a problem out there in California. Arizona, also D, they get a state tax credit where 25% of the cost of your solar system up to $1,000. Well, I don't know how many systems are $4,000 or less. So obviously, why not just say you get $1,000 state tax credit? State governed wholesale, the net metering is as wholesale, and it's exempt from property and sales tax and has some low income programs. The state of Virginia, retail net metering, that's another biggie there, and property tax with community solar. Those are good. South Carolina, now that was a surprise to me. I would have assumed they were ranked lower, but coming in at 12th, tied for 12th. 25% is a state tax credit, capped at $35,000. So significant, significantly large system there, obviously. If it's more than that, would be what, $140,000 system to cap. Then you get the wholesale rate and exempt from property taxes. Connecticut, D, I think we're almost about ready to change from a D to a C here pretty soon. State governed billing at wholesale, property taxes, sales taxes, and low income. Colorado, again, a lot of activity out there, but still ranked with a D. And these are the same essentially as Connecticut. And now Minnesota, it comes in at a C, ranked number 10. So we're into the top 10. And I don't know, before we get in even further, if you haven't read the report, anybody have a guess as to what the number one state is? Yeah, Pete, you got a question or a guess?
I won't guess on the number one state, but people should know that in Minnesota, there's a utility commission that has determined the value of solar, and it's higher than retail. And
Really?
their findings were based on a number of things, but their excess production is credited at higher than retail because the value of solar, time of production, a bunch of things, they determined it was worth more than retail.
Yeah. Well, that's why we all like Minnesota. I mean, everybody, I remember when I was a kid living in Minnesota, and it occurred to me one day in the middle of the winter that there was a whole country north of us, which just blew my mind. You know, I was like, how can they survive? You know, but
well, Jay, as a New Yorker, I want to guess New York, but I think it's going to be Massachusetts. That's my bet.
That's your prediction? Okay. All right. Well, good choices. They're still in the top 10. Both of those. We haven't gotten there. See, anybody else want to venture a guess before we move to number 9 here? We'll give you
I grew up in Maryland, so I'll venture Maryland as a guess.
okay, good. Nice choice. Okay. Number 9 gets a C, Oregon. Oregon. I was surprised Oregon was up there because, both Oregon and Washington have a lot of hydro. So I just figured, there wasn't a lot of reason for incentives, but they're doing pretty well up there. Number 8, well, New York. So you didn't make number 1. Tax credit, 25%. It has, again, between wholesale and retail for your net metering. Then there's property taxes, localized, not statewide. Solar panel systems fully exempt from sales tax and low income programs. Number 7, Massachusetts. So we're still narrowing it down. Everybody hopefully is thinking, what other states are out there? Maryland's still in contention, Adam. All right, potential SRECs. Here's the first time SRECs have been mentioned, and there are a few states out there still with SRECs, but states like Ohio that have SRECs that are paying like $4 a rec makes them kind of useless. But a state like Massachusetts, you can make more than $300. Tax credits on it, up $1,000. Fraction of retail, somewhere between wholesale and retail there. 20-year tax exemption on property taxes, sales tax, community solar. So we're starting to get Rhode Island, number 6. So now we're up in the Northeast, but we're getting basically the whole array of items. Then we jump to a B, number 5, Illinois. And Illinois is a little bit interesting. They do have this Illinois Solar for All program. And that's like a prepaid SRECs program. I don't know. Do we have anybody from Illinois on here who it's a bit of a complicated system, and but it's a significant incentive. It's like it will prepay you, if I remember right, like 15 years of SRECs up front. It throws a bit of management in it because the installer, if I recall, is liable then to make sure that system does in fact produce at the levels that were projected, because they're paying up front for 15 years. So you've got to like post a bond of some sort to make sure that system does in fact produce, because the state is paying for it. Okay, then number 4. Okay, Adam, you just missed out. Maryland came in number 4. $1,000 rebate on your system installation, retail net metering. That's all good. Fully exempt from property taxes and sales taxes, and has low income program. I don't believe it has community solar to the same extent like a state like Minnesota does. New Mexico, number 3. Didn't hear anybody guessing New Mexico, but now we're out there in the land of enchantment. We get all of these tax credits, retail meters, compensated wholesale rate, all of that stuff. Okay, number 2. Now I'll ask, we're down to 2. And I'll give you a hint. One of them's not really a state. So that should have been, it's Washington.
Washington.
Yeah, Washington, D.C. comes in. It wants to be a state, right? It wants to be a state. So although we put in Puerto Rico, that's another one. So, okay, yeah, the SRECs in Washington are significant. $400 for an SREC there. And in case for some of you don't know what an SREC is, think of it like a carbon credit, where the utilities have been mandated by the state to produce a certain amount of their power from a renewable source. So they have a couple of choices. They can go out and invest and build their own solar and wind, or they can buy wind and solar generated power from somebody else, as a power purchase agreement of some sort. Or if my system is connected up to the utility, they can come to me and say, listen, I want to purchase the right to put your power in my portfolio. I'm not buying your power. I'm just buying the right to claim that I've got a certain amount of this generated through renewable energy. So they're buying like a carbon credit. And the owner of the system can actually make significant amount of money. You know, like my little system at the farm generates about 1 megawatt or 1 rec a month. So that would be 12 SRECs that I could sell. And if they're paying $400 a piece for these, you know, that's going to be almost $5,000 a year coming to me. I'm not selling them my electricity. I'm using my electricity. I'm just selling them the right to claim that part of renewable generation as part of their portfolio. So it doesn't cost me anything and I get $5,000. Well, that's a big incentive for people to install. Now the utilities come back and say, listen, that's pushing up the cost of electricity. We're having to pay for these things. It's not benefiting the customer in any way. The state is saying, well, but you're not willing to put this stuff in. So we're going to give you a carrot and stick kind of approach. We're going to try and incentivize you to go green. We don't care how you do it. And so that's the back and forth. We saw this in Ohio with the testimony where the utilities came in and argued with the legislature about the RECs, and the RECs went ahead and they put it on hold for a couple of years to study it. Like Ohio likes to study things. They never do study it, but they put it on hold for a couple of years. And then I testified when they were talking about reinstating it and pointed out that not a single utility reduced the cost of electricity during this hold on RECs when they were claiming it was elevating the cost of electricity. Nobody cut the cost when that was no longer in place. So I felt like that was potent argument. Nobody on the panel thought anything. I mean, there were 129 people testifying, 128 against it, 1 person from the utilities in favor. So they voted in favor of it. You know, that's democracy in action. All right. So let's see. Number 1, New Jersey, right? New Jersey. They have it all. That should be their motto. So the Garden State is number 1 with Maryland has credits for energy storage. Yeah, a lot of them now are getting into energy storage. But SRECs, they have over $200 for their SRECs. Retail net metering. Panels are fully property tax exempt, sales tax exempt, community solar. They've got it. They've got everything. So that was our countdown. Does anybody have any comments on that before we call it a day here? Give it
Hey Jay, just adding that Maryland does have community solar.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah, I put a link in there just for what it's worth.
Okay. All right, great. Well, we'll move. They're neck and neck up there with New Jersey. So I must say that given the choice, Maryland sounds more appealing as a place to live than New Jersey, but that's just going to get me hate mail. So, all right. Okay. Well, we'll see you guys next week. Same time, same bat channel. So see you again, and thanks for your patience, and talk to you next week. Bye-bye.